At Granger, we're for the ones who pay attention to every little detail. The ones who fuss, tinker, and sweat the small stuff. Because you know the tiniest thing can make the biggest difference when it comes to keeping business moving. We get it. We're the same way. Offering access to product experts to help you quickly and easily find what you need. So whatever your industry, you know you're always getting professional-grade products. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast, where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker.
And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come. And we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Welcome back to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayhart, and this is the podcast where we talk about the continual pursuit of the section hiker and what it takes to complete a trail section by section. Today on the podcast, we have Christopher Condap, aka iPod, to talk to us about his section hiking of the Pacific Crest Trail, his section hiking of the Continental Divide Trail, and Pacific Crest Trail logistics. Right away, when I started chatting with Christopher, I knew that he could lead all of us through the logistical side of section hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. But first, we must learn about who Christopher is and how he got started on those awesome trails on the West Coast. Welcome to the podcast, Christopher.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Really excited about you being on the show and getting your story out there of how you got started hiking on the PCT, and now you're section hiking on the CDT. And I have officially named you the Pacific Crest Trail Logistics Guru, Christopher. So hopefully you're okay with that.
I am okay with that. As long as I can answer people's questions. That's the most important thing.
All right, perfect. So let's just start off the show by telling the listeners that you actually did through hike the Pacific Crest Trail in 2012, but you've also section hiked several sections of the PCT since then. Talk to the listeners about how you first heard about the PCT and why you decided to through hike the trail.
Yeah, I've done some through hiking and some section hiking. It usually depends on just how much time I have available.
Right.
It's not necessarily a function of like, oh, how much distance do I want to do? Because if I'm free, then I want to keep going. So I started off in 2009, actually, as my first section hike of the PCT. I hiked essentially the Oregon section. And when I got to the end, I started in Northern California and hiked all the way to the Oregon-Washington border.
How many miles is that?
It's about 450 across Oregon. And then I did another like 100 miles or so in Northern California getting to Oregon around Mount Shasta. And then when I got to the end, I was looking up at Washington and I thought to myself, if I had more resupply boxes, if I didn't have to like go back to work, I could just keep going on this thing. Like I'm not tired. I'm not sick of it. I love being dirty and sweaty and hiking up and down mountains. So I could just keep going.
Yeah. I knew there was a reason you and I would get along.
Yeah. Hiker, there's a default level of affinity between hikers because we love sharing the same lifestyle. You walk up to another hiker and you don't think of them as like, oh, all that dirt and sweat, that's not repulsive. That's, that's a mark of what you've achieved. Like you earned all that dirt and all that sweat. So, yeah.
So that started in 2009, right?
That's where I started on the PCT. And then it took me about 3 years to, get the itch and start planning for more of the PCT. But I thought to myself, hey, if I have the time, then I think I'm just going to do the whole thing. Even the Oregon section, which I had already done, which is beautiful. And, people ask me like, oh, are you just going to skip ahead of it? And I was like, no, I'm going to do it again because it's awesome. I'm going to hike the whole thing all the way through. And
nice. Yeah, very nice.
Loved it.
Very nice. So now that we've established, you kind of started section hiking the PCT in 2009, and then you through hiked in 2012. you keep doing additional segments of the PCT, correct? You still keep section hiking. So what's drawing you back to keep section hiking the PCT?
Well, I think anybody that has, done a section or the entirety of the Pacific Crest Trail will know that what draws me back is that it's just a beautiful trail overall. Even the worst sections, even the worst days, the worst parts of it are still way better than, anything that I get in real life. People say the worst day on the trail is always better than the best day in real life.
And that is very true.
Yeah, and that is a truism that people understand if they've been in the wilderness long enough. I've hiked many sections that coincide with the PCT in the Sierras, in the high Sierras. I live in the Bay Area, so that's kind of my backyard. And,
oh, wow. Very nice.
What I consider to be one of the most beautiful places in the country, if not in the world. And I have also rehiked sections in Washington and Oregon because they're also amazing sections of the PCT.
Absolutely gorgeous. Mm-hmm. I did the Wonderland Trail this past summer in just the Pacific Northwest. Like I've said this before, I could literally move there today. It's just, it's just gorgeous. Totally
gorgeous. It's a fantastic place. Yeah. And the Wonderland Trail is great to do if you're lucky enough to get it without any rain. But I know people that have hiked that and have had rain on them for, all 10 days that they were on there, just one day after another. So
and I think I got real lucky because we literally had 10 days of clear, perfectly blue skies. So I don't know if you test that fate again.
Yeah, exactly. I think I think you got very lucky on that.
So basically you just keep going out to the PCT. I mean, the Sierra. Now I've been told it's the Sierra, not the Sierras. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. If you want to get pedantic about it, it is the Sierra Nevada mountain range.
Okay.
But if you don't want to,
I don't want to, hurt anybody's feelings. Being out here on the East Coast and having this accent, I just want to make sure I say it right.
Not only are you correct, but you are the best kind of correct, technically.
Okay.
Yeah. Although,
all right. I'll take it. I'll take it.
And I'm always careful whenever I'm talking to people about the Appalachian Trail, depending on who I'm talking to, because sometimes I've been told that it is the Appalachian Trail, and sometimes I've been told that it is the Appalachian Trail. And I always make sure that I'm saying it right, depending on who I'm talking to.
And that's correct. It depends on if they're below the Mason-Dixon line or above the Mason-Dixon line, because I say Appalachian Trail. So
yeah, whereas people I know say Appalachian Trail. And I haven't hiked any of the AT before, but I've been told that there is a sign on the Mason-Dixon line on the AT that says now exiting the Appalachian Trail and now entering the Appalachian Trail. And of course, it's funny because it's spelled exactly the same.
Exactly. And that is true. And when you go to the midway point, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy is in Harper's Ferry, and it's actually phonetically spelled out when you're in the restroom. Now you are to say it this way. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yes.
It's
Perfect.
kind of funny. So,
Trail
so you continue to go out on your PCT section hikes, and somewhere along the way, you got your trail name iPod. So tell us about your trail name.
Oh yeah, and that was pretty early on. I think it was the first couple of weeks in my very first section hike in 2009. I was in Sayad Valley, which is the last trail town in Northern California before you hit Oregon, heading north. And I was accused of stealing an iPod from the Sayad Valley Cafe in the lovely town of Sayad Valley, California.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the town called the sheriff, and I spent a good couple of hours talking to him, going through my pack, and just,
wow.
And afterwards, the sheriff, even though he, couldn't find the missing iPod, because of course I hadn't taken it, I had my own at the time, he proceeded to tell the rest of the town that, he didn't find it, but it was definitely me. So I was taking a 0 day, and the entire rest of the day I was treated to small groups of people just coming up and trying to convince me to give it back. And I kept telling him, like, hey, I can't give back what I don't have. I'm sorry. I really hope it gets found. But fortunate, I hiked out really early the next morning to make sure I didn't run into any locals on the way out of town, because the trail goes like on the road literally right through the entirety of the town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And another hiker caught up to me. He's a through hiker, so he was going way faster than I was. He had been hiking for, months, whereas I had only been hiking for a couple of weeks. So he caught up to me and told me the rest of the story. The father of the young boy who actually took the iPod found him with it and drove him back into town.
Oh, no.
They were on a vacation. He drove him back into town and made him give it back and apologize. And so everyone in town was really sorry for what they put me through. So
wow.
Yeah. There you go. That's my trail
pretty
name.
much,
iPod.
yeah, so...
Yeah. My buddy turned to me and he was like, "Okay, your name's iPod now." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." There you go.
That is cool.
iPod.
At least you adopted it. Like, okay, I'll take it. You know, it's a good story. It is a good story.
Yeah,
wow.
I earned that trail name.
Yeah, you sure did. You sure did. So, all right, 2009, you got section hiking. 2012, you did your through hike. It sounds like you keep going back to your favorite areas, but you're also section hiking currently the Continental Divide Trail. So talk to us a little bit about when you started that, what sections you've done, and kind of get into that a little bit for us.
It's true. And I think as anyone who has hiked the Continental Divide Trail knows, it is a very love-hate relationship with that particular trail, because it is...
Oh, okay.
It's, the similarities to it with the PCT is that the CDT starts at the Mexican border and ends at the Canadian border. And it is a West Coast trail, so generally speaking, you should expect for good weather. But the CDT is just a much bigger, much rougher, much less forgiving beast. And the unofficial, or perhaps even official model of the CDT is, quote, embrace the brutality, unquote. Like, you are going to come up with situations that are going to be very trying and very stressful. And the official advice is, just embrace it. That's just how this trail is. You know, you're going to get through it and you're going to feel like a badass because you did get through it. So
exactly.
I hiked about half of the CDT in 2014. That was my first experience with it. And there was a lot of snow. And
wow. Now, did you start down in, where did you start? In the southern terminus or the northern terminus?
Yeah, there are 3 places to start on the CDT. One of the big differences between that and trails like the PCT and the AT is that there are a lot of different options for where you can go on the CDT. Some of them are official, some of them are not, but nobody really cares about, oh, you didn't hike the official trail. I know there are some people that, talk about different types of blazes, like blue blazes and yellow blazes for people taking alternate routes on the Appalachian Trail. Nobody cares on the CDT whether, which way you go particularly. It's just whichever way you want to go. And sometimes I've wondered if any 2 hikers have ever done exactly the same trail, there being so many times where you have to get off trail to go around things, or just prefer to go a different way because there might be more water or it might be easier to find on a map. And also that there are even 3 places to start and 2 places to end. In New Mexico, you can start at Antelope Wells, which is the southernmost starting point.
Okay. Now, is that the most popular, or is that, you said, is that just the southern?
It's just the southernmost. I don't think it's the most popular. It's just on maps, and it's a place you can go to start if you really, really want to start as far south as possible. I think the most popular starting point is the Crazy Cook Monument, which is also in the boot heel of New Mexico, that little part that sticks down. But actually it starts where the Mexican-New Mexican border is heading north to south. So actually Mexico is east of you at that point. I think that's the most popular, and people will need to get a ride out to the trail because it's at the end of a very long dirt road, and it is a very rough dirt road. So you can't even just drive yourself out there. You have to have someone drive you out there who owns like a 4-wheel drive Jeep, essentially.
Interesting. Now, is it deserty as well? Like, is there a certain, on the PCT, which we're going to get into here shortly, is it, X amount of miles desert? Then you get into, I know you get into the Colorado, Rockies and, north of that. So I guess kind of lay out the CDT just so we have a mind frame of, okay, desert, that kind of thing.
I think a lot of people, and myself included, can be surprised about just how little actual desert is in New Mexico. Before I went to New Mexico, I always pictured like essentially the Sonora Desert. It's, it's dry. It's, kind of rough and sandy. There's a lot of cacti and bushes. And that is very much so what the CDT is like in the very first section between the border and Lordsburg being the first town on the CDT. And I believe that's about 80 miles. And it took us a few days. No, 80 miles? Maybe it's more like 100 or 120, because it definitely took us like 6 days across that very section. And it is very much deserty, very much the Sonora Desert if you've ever been down to the American Southwest. It is dry, it is hot, and it is one of the most unforgiving parts of New Mexico. But fortunately, after Lordsburg, it's only a few miles and a day or two before the trail climbs up to above 5,000 feet elevation, and it stays there for a lot of the rest of New Mexico. A lot of the Continental Divide Trail, of course, being on the Continental Divide, is about as high up as you can get it in New Mexico, and that's actually pretty tall.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there's a lot of pine trees. There's a lot of shade. Because you're at high elevation, the weather is cooler, and a reasonable amount of water, although water is still a challenge in New Mexico for the rest of the state. It's not really until you get to, the very end of New Mexico that you do actually start climbing up even higher. And that was actually my favorite part of New Mexico, the part that starts looking like Colorado.
Right. Now I've heard once you get up in that area, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I've also heard that it's popular to start north and then hike south because of the weather and things that affect, and you get through like Yellowstone. It starts at Yellowstone, right?
Oh, no, Yellowstone is in Wyoming. It starts in Glacier National Park.
In Glacier, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That is one of the differences between the PCT and the CDT. The PCT, for some reason that nobody really knows why, like over 90% of the people that attempt to thru hike on the PCT start at the southern terminus and hike northbound. We're not exactly sure why that is, because the very first hiker that is acknowledged as having thru hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, Eric Ryback, he actually hiked southbound. So historically, it's a southbound trail, but for some reason we all like hiking northbound over here on the PCT. And it could be because
it's very popular to hike northbound
very,
on the
very popular,
AT
northbound
as well. So it seems to be that hey, I hiked north on the AT, now I'm going to hike north on the PCT, and it only makes sense that I'm going to northbound the CDT.
Yeah, that makes sense. It could also be for the fact that on the PCT, the hiking season starts earlier for Southern California because it's not as high elevation. There's not as much snow, so you can start getting through it. As some people start as early as March.
Wow!
So I think a lot of people look at northbound hiking and say, "Oh, Southern California is the easiest of the 5 major sections of the Pacific Crest Trail, and if I start early, I'll have a good amount of time to warm up before the Sierras, which is widely regarded as the hardest part of the Pacific Crest Trail." So that could also be that as well.
Yeah.
Hiking southbound, starting in Washington, you are starting in what is quite possibly the second hardest state to go through, and some of the hardest individual sections of the entire trail, in my opinion. So that could have something to do with it. But on the CDT, no, you get you get a lot more experienced hikers, people that are quite comfortable starting in very rough terrain. I've heard there are a lot of high passes in Glacier National Park, although I haven't done that section yet myself. I'm looking forward to it.
Right.
So it's mostly a choice of just like when you're free to do it or when the weather is going to be more accommodating, like when the snow is going to melt. You do see a similar thing with New Mexico, people starting in, roughly the month of April, beginning through the end of April, depending on the snow, and then getting to Colorado, and there still being a lot of lingering snow around there, getting through it just like the Sierras, and then dropping back down to a little lower elevation after you get done with that. But yeah, I think people in the CDT are just more comfortable making a decision based on weather and based on timing rather than based on like, oh, I'm going to have this nice, easy warm-up section before I get to the really hard stuff. Because, it's hopefully if you're hiking the Continental Divide Trail, especially as a thru hike, that it's not your first long distance hike. There's a lot of things that need to be figured out. As I mentioned before, the CDT is rather unforgiving. The sections are a lot longer, so you have to plan ahead a lot further. There are a lot more sections where there are fewer outlets, right? There are fewer bailout points if you get into trouble. And there are such fewer people on the CDT that you can't guarantee, like on the Appalachian Trail or the PCT, that if you get injured or if you get lost or if you get in trouble, that you can just,
that you'll
sit down on the trail and someone will be along in a bit, or you'll be able to get out on your own power. It's just, it's not recommended for inexperienced long distance hikers.
Right. Well, Christopher, I am going to go ahead and guarantee the listeners that we are definitely going to have you back on, because this next little segment that you and I are going to talk about with the logistics of section hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, I'd love to do that also, the logistics of hiking the Continental Divide Trail. So if you'll come back on, we'll do that in a future episode. But I have a lot of questions about the section hiking logistics of the Pacific Crest Trail. So what I've done is just kind of put several things that I thought of that maybe I would want to know, and people like me that section hike the Appalachian Trail, and the next natural progression would be, hey, let's go section hike the PCT. So the next several questions are geared toward that. And what we'll do is we'll just start right off with number one. I know there is a permit process for the PCT. So what's the permit process for the thru hiker, and then what's the permit process for the section hiker?
Yeah. So for the thru hikers are encouraged but not technically required to obtain a long distance permit through the Pacific Crest Trail Association, the PCTA.
Okay, so they're not required.
Not technically, no. Because the land is administered by Forest Service and Park Service and BLM, federal agencies.
Okay.
It's you can obtain permits for individual parks and wildernesses and BLM land, but the long distance permit is very convenient because it's one permit for the entire trail. So you don't have to continually keep getting permits for each particular section that you are hiking. The long distance permit is for people that are hiking 500 or more miles on the Pacific Crest Trail. So if you are a thru hiker or just a very long distance section hiker, this is the permit for you. There are a few restrictions on it. The number of people that can start in Campo, California, that's the southern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail, is limited to 50 people per day. And there are so many people hiking northbound that those permits are issued and get taken up essentially within the first day of being issued. They get issued 35 at a time back in October, I believe. And then coming up in January, they're going to be issuing 15 more per day for a total of 50 per day. And they are very highly sought after. People will wait in line on the internet for hours and hours to try and get a good position to get a PCTA long distance permit. But the good thing is that for southbound hiking and for section hiking, it's not as desirable. There's not as much rush to get the permits on the first day that they're given out. For section hiking, the PCT has always been happy to find a section hiking permit for me, as considering that I'm not starting at the southern terminus along with everybody else. I'm usually starting, sometime in like June or July, and just somewhere in the middle of the trail. And that's totally fine.
And all of this can be found on the Pacific Crest Trail Association website, correct?
Yes. Anybody wishing for more information, more detailed and official information on the PCTA's long distance permits and other permits for hiking the PCT, should go to the PCTA's website at pcta.org.
Perfect. Okay. So very, very, very popular. This gets into question number 2.
Sure.
Very popular section hike on the PCT is the John Muir Trail. So talk to us about that permit process that people have to go through if they want to section hike a little bit of the PCT, but they want to complete the John Muir Trail.
Yeah. So the John Muir Trail that goes down the backbone of the High Sierra, non-plural, for those of you who are listening, the High Sierra. The John Muir Trail is one of the most popular long-distance hiking trails in the world. It's about 225 miles, and you can get a permit for that from either Yosemite National Park, that's where the northern terminus is, or for the Forest Service by Mount Whitney, from the Whitney Portal. That's the southern terminus of the John Muir Trail. And it coincides with the Pacific Crest Trail for about 170 miles, and maybe a little more if you do some of the side parts that are only John Muir Trail and not Pacific Crest Trail. Traditionally, that one's hiked southbound, in contrast to the Pacific Crest Trail and Appalachian Trail and somewhat the Continental Divide Trail, because that's the uphill section, I suppose. Like the trail gets, higher and higher as you hike south through the Sierra, ending at Mount Whitney, which of course is at 14,500 feet, which is the highest point in the continental United States, much to the chagrin of Colorado residents who live within, distance of a lot of many 14,000 foot peaks. We in
California owns Mount Whitney. So
but we own Mount Whitney, so we have the highest one. So whatever.
And,
Sorry,
and
it's
that
not a
permit
competition.
process is like, now I've heard there's like 10,000 people a day that try to get that permit.
I'm not sure about 10,000 people a day, but there is a lottery system where
maybe 10,000 people a season or something like that, and they only let maybe like 40 a day start or something like that.
I'm not going to say no, and that doesn't sound crazy to me, but I just can't confirm that myself personally. But there is a lottery system for everyone to submit their applications for a permit to the National Park Service or the Forest Service, that where if you get selected, then great, they'll give you a permit. And if not, then you just have to send in your permit again, permit application again. And back in the day in 2013, when I specifically hiked the John Muir Trail, this was all done over a fax machine. So
wow.
I sent in a fax on Tuesday, got notification back on Wednesday saying that I was rejected, sent in another application on Thursday, and finally got accepted on Friday. So it's good advice on the John Muir Trail to have not a start date in mind, but a start window where you'd be totally okay starting whenever, as long as it takes for you to get a permit. And they do it exactly 6 months in advance. I think, exactly 180 days in advance from the day that you are intending to start. And I believe if you look up on the National Park Service website, nps.gov, if you're in the John Muir Trail section, they have a table that tells you if you want to start on, say, August 10th, then you should send in your application on this particular day in February.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, they have it timed down to the exact day that you want to start, because there is just so much competition for John Muir Trail permits. And because there's so much competition for John Muir Trail permits, a lot of people aware of the PCT and the long distance permit that the PCTA issues will, instead of getting a John Muir Trail permit, they'll apply for a PCT permit. And unfortunately, the Park Service and Forest Service and PCTA have caught on to this fact that people are getting long-distance permits just to hike the High Sierra. And so there's now a limitation on the number of permits that will coincide with the High Sierra. So I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but it is limited. So if you're looking to get a permit that goes over the High Sierra section for the PCT or the John Muir Trail, the advice is to start early. Figure out just when you can apply, and apply as early as possible, and then keep applying until you get a day that works for you.
So now we know there's a permit system, whether you're section hiking a long section, whether you're through hiking, whether you want to hike the John Muir Trail. So break down the PCT for us, like specifically, like here on the East Coast. Okay, we know there's a desert, we know there's a Sierra, we know there's north, but break it down as far as like sections and segments.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm aware, a lot of people on the Appalachian Trail like to break down that trail by state. I'm hiking in Georgia, correct. I'm hiking in Tennessee, I'm hiking in Pennsylvania, and my boots are getting torn up because Pennsylvania, so I hear. On the PCT, we also like to break
your boots for sure.
Yeah, so I hear. Looking forward to it.
Come on, you want your Triple Crown. Come on.
Oh, it's out there.
It's looming. Yes,
it's looming. Yeah, it's getting closer and closer every day. So in the PCT, we also like to break it up by state. But California is 1,700 miles long by trail. So it's just such a massive state that a lot of people take, like 2 to 3 months to get through the entire thing. So we break down California furthermore into 3 separate sections so that logistically, we don't just say California, we say Southern California, Central California, and Northern California. And then that's in addition to Oregon and Washington, which are, about 500 miles long each. And so that's like a section of the PCT, if you want to refer to it all by state. Southern California starts off as, quote, the desert. If you're referring to the desert of the PCT, you're referring to Southern California. And interestingly, it's a good mix of, low elevation, hot, sandy, dry, deserty section. Sometimes where there are waterless stretches for up to 30 miles, I believe. I think that's the longest dry carry.
Right.
Where water caches are very important, which, if I'm looking on the list of questions you have for me, I think we're going to get to down the line for water caches. So we'll talk about
we can talk about that now since we're talking about the desert. So in that section, those water caches, go into that just a little bit for us.
So you do have long, dry carries where where there are no natural water sources for anybody to get. And those sections are supplemented by trail angels and people that live next to the trail, leaving, hundreds of gallons of water at a time up on the trail for hikers to make sure that they don't get dehydrated or even worse, like heat stroke.
And that is truly amazing. Like I've seen pictures of that out on like Facebook pages. That is truly amazing that the Trail Angels are doing that. That's amazing.
You'll be hiking the trail and you'll come around a corner and you'll see, 100 plastic bottles, 100-gallon plastic bottles of water just waiting there for you. And you'll think to yourself, man, like this is the middle of nowhere. Someone must have really gone out of their way to do this for me. And it's trail etiquette not to take any more water than you absolutely need, because there's always the person behind you. And that's one of the big reasons why the PCTA is limiting the number of permits issued for starting northbound in Southern California to 50 people a day, because like with 50 people a day, a lot of these water caches are getting overrun by hikers. Even if everybody just takes a little tiny bit times 50 means that the water cache is going to run out within a day or two. And that very nice person who is, who drove up in a truck and dumped all that water there is just going to have to do that, 3 or 4 times a week, which seems
I was going to say that becomes a full-time job for somebody.
Yeah. And not even to mention just like the cost in gasoline to drive it up there, or even at that point, the cost in water that you're, I assume, getting out of a hose from your house.
Right.
Yeah. So it is a very nice thing that a few people on the PCT do. And it's always lovely to run into a water cache. But official advice is that you should always be prepared if your water cache turns out to be dry, because again, there are so many people, the odds of having a dry water cache are just,
very high. It sounds like
it's reasonable. Like I have come across dry water caches, and this was back in 2012 when there were only 600 people a year doing the trail. I came across dry water caches myself, and I was like, oh, it's a good thing I have extra water to get me through. My advice to people is to always carry about 1.5 times the amount of water you think it'll take you to get to the next water source, because then you have a little bit extra if you get burned by a dry water source, whether it's a water cache or a natural source. Just, like if it's dry, what are you going to do? So just take a little bit of extra water. So that's part of Southern California. But another big part of Southern California is the high elevation sections like Mount San Jacinto, which is over 10,000 feet at the very peak. The peak is not on the Pacific Crest Trail, but it's just a nice little side trail to go up and hike up to the top of there, which I've been told is a very nice view all the way down to the valley where Palm Springs is. It is a 10,000 foot elevation difference from the top to the bottom of Mount San Jacinto. So it's a very great view.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And as the trail goes north and starts hiking west along the Angeles National Forest, the Angeles crest is all above 7,000 feet, I believe. So again, lots of pine trees, some snow lingering from earlier on in the season. So even in Southern California, in quote, the desert, some people, if they're starting early in the season for the PCT, are starting with microspikes or crampons or an ice axe or maybe all of those things, just so they can get through the snow sections a little easier.
Right.
But that's more for people that are starting in March. People that are starting in April won't have, very long sections of snow to deal with. Maybe like 50 feet at a time maximum. And, it's fine.
And like for section hikers wanting to do that section, I think you and I, when we talked on the phone, it's recommended that you don't go there after May. So if you're trying to section hike that section, it's really weather dependent. It's just too hot after May, or...
Yeah, starting in May, we get into the season where those low elevation hot sections are just going to be just too hot to hike through. Like you're not going to enjoy it. You're increasing the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and it's just not recommended. You're also running out of time if you're a thru hiker to get through the rest of the trail before the snow comes down in Washington. It's a weird thing to think about, like, oh, you can't start too late in May in Southern California because you're going to run out of time in Washington. But it's a very real thing. People that start late oftentimes only make it up to, like Oregon or Southern Washington before the snow starts coming down. And then it's just dangerous to keep hiking.
Yeah.
So with Southern California, the further you get into May, the more dangerous the hiking becomes until, you're getting, consistent over 100-degree weather days. And that's on trail where, there might not be a way to get out of the trail and get out of that heat for another 15 miles or so in either direction if you're on a 30-mile dry section. So most people will start between the first week of March and the first week of May for the Pacific Crest Trail. Whereas in a normal snow year, average levels of snow, the ideal time to leave the trail has always been somewhere between April 15th and April 25th or so. Just like, it's like mid to late April is ideal, but
Right.
the PCT will issue a permit starting back as far early as the 1st of March, I believe.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So now that we've kind of broken that down a little bit, and we could spend forever even, just
Yeah.
talking about the different segments. And I know one of the most popular apps that are out there that people are using for their maps and things like that is Guthook. But what I'm understanding is that the PCT is a little bit different beast. Yeah, you want your Guthooks, but you also want your other maps and you want your other things. So talk to us a little bit about recommendations for maps. Yes, use Guthooks and things like that.
I always recommend Guthooks as the best single source of information that you can get on the trail. If you just want one thing and only one thing, and want to know as much about the trail as possible, including information about the trail, landmarks, trail towns, how to get to and from the trail, and a mapping GPS system, then you'll want Guthook's app, which I think is called Atlas Guides or something like that. They changed the name last year or the year before.
Yeah, they did, but I think everybody still calls it Guthooks.
Everybody's still calling it Guthooks.
I'm pretty sure it's Atlas Guides now.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So if that is what I consider to be the best single source of information. Although I started hiking before Guthooks was an app, before smartphones were a thing. So I never got into Guthooks myself. I hike with Gaia GPS, which is a general purpose GPS mapping service. They describe it as a good tool for long distance backpackers, day hikers, hunters, and people that are navigating like on boats, maybe like oceanically, on sailboats, or even for people that are flying small airplanes, because it works in all those situations. And the good thing about Gaia GPS is that just recently, just this last October, November, like this last month or so, Lon Cooper, whose trail name is Half Mile, has released a version of the Gaia GPS map tile set specifically for the Pacific Crest Trail in conjunction with National Geographic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Who, if you've ever seen National Geographic maps,
yes,
they are very well drawn, very detailed.
Yes,
just very easy to look at and follow. So they've partnered with Half Mile to come up with what looks like the best looking maps for the PCT that I've ever seen personally. They're available on Gaia GPS if you have their premium service. Unfortunately, it's behind a paywall.
Right.
But since I already bought the premium service years ago, I was able to look at it immediately on day one, and they were amazing. If you search for National Geographic PCT maps, they'll show you a few examples of what you'll find, and they're incredible. And they're also great because Half Mile, Lon Cooper, also has a free version of PCT maps available on his website, pctmap.net, I believe. Just Google PCT maps. I think it's the first
Now,
result.
are those printable? Like, can you print the PDFs, or how does that work?
They are indeed. He has them as individual PDFs for each small section, and these are not sections on the PCT like, Northern California, Southern California, Oregon, Washington, Central California. These are lettered sections which go between popular trailheads and places where you can start hiking and stop hiking. So for section hikers, this is probably what we'll be thinking about for individual sections.
Yeah, because I've seen on some of the Facebook pages, I'm hiking, section S in, I'm going to get this wrong because I don't know. So you'll have to, I'm hiking
fair.
section S in California, or I'm hiking section B in Oregon. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, it looks like California is labeled A through R.
Okay.
Alpha through Romeo, if you're into NATO phonetic. And unfortunately, there are too many sections in Oregon and Washington to just keep labeling them with letters of the alphabet, because there are more than 26. There are 29 lettered sections that Half Mile breaks up his maps into. So in Oregon, it starts again with A. Oregon section A is the same as California section R on his maps. So then Oregon is B, C, D, E, F, G, and then Washington is H, I, J, K, L.
Okay, that makes sense. Because when I've been going out on some section hiker pages, and I'm like, I need to learn the lingo.
It's a very easy way to refer to exactly what part of the trail you're hiking. But I think for And it's always nice when you're on trail and you finish a lettered section, you can get rid of those maps and get some new maps. It's, it's a mark of achievement. But I think with long distance hikers, especially through hikers, we tend to refer to sections just by which town we started in rather than the particular letter. Because once you start doing a lot of letters, like I know that Campo, California is section A because it's the first part of California. And I know that the High Sierra, a lot of the John Muir Trail, is section H, just because I've used those maps so much. But if you ask me where...
I wouldn't have a clue. I'm over here going I-H-A. Yeah. Okay, where's the southern terminus? Where's the northern terminus? Okay, let me figure this out.
And I've been hiking on the PCT for years, and I still don't... Like, if you ask me where California section P begins and ends, I have no idea. Like, you'd have to tell me what town that starts on. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Or I'd have to look it up. So it is confusing, and I understand that. But Half Mile has his maps broken up by lettered section, and they're free to download and absolutely free to print out for yourself. They come in PDF, so if you want to upload the PDF files directly to your smartphone and just use them digitally, that's totally fine too. Just make sure that you don't run out of battery and can keep your phone protected from the elements, rain, wind, snow, and such. But myself, I only carry digital maps. I've stopped carrying paper maps a few years ago.
Okay.
So it is doable if you are confident in your digital skills. But of course, they always say the low-tech solution is often the best solution with long-distance hiking. So if you want to carry paper maps too, I don't think anybody's going to yell at you for having
some people just like having
maps.
the paper maps too. So
some people, that's just what they prefer. Like they don't even want to deal with or carry digital maps, or maybe they'll have those digital maps as a backup just in case they lose their paper maps. They just prefer the tactile sensation of paper maps and just the ability to keep your paper maps in your pocket so you can just reach for them and get them rather than having to go into your phone all the time and waste your battery.
Right. So before we wrap this up, let's talk about, because I think this is, and I'm learning as well as we're going through this and talking about the Pacific Crest Trail, because of course this is on my bucket list next.
It is a wonderful trail.
Let's talk about how weather dependent the Pacific Crest Trail is. So for a section hiker, for myself, I'm an educator and I know you're an educator too. We have our summers off. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sitting here right now going, oh my gosh, I'd love to go through the High Sierra, but I'm not going to know if it's a high snow year and things like that. So talk us through how a section hiker is going to kind of try to figure this out.
Yeah. So while I believe the Appalachian Trail is entirely under 8,000 feet, right? I think the high point is like 7,500 or
even lower than that.
Even lower. Okay.
Yeah, it's just under 7,000. Just under 7,000.
Just under 7,000. Okay. So while I hear about people, some brave people hiking the Appalachian Trail all year round, in times like December or January or February, there are a lot of sections on the Pacific Crest Trail where your particular section will just be buried under snow between possibly November through June. And so there's a definite hiking season and a definite non-hiking season. In fact, there are only two people on record who have ever thru-hiked the Pacific Crest Trail over the winter, two hikers by the name Trauma and Pepper. And since they set this record of doing a winter thru hike of the Pacific Crest Trail, no one has since done it again. It's such a
that's
rare
amazing
thing.
in and of itself.
I haven't even heard of anybody trying to do that again. It's such an anomaly.
Yeah. It just seems so limited to somebody, if you live out there, you can pick when you want a section hike, you can go to the beautiful parts, but if you're on the opposite side of the country, it just seems kind of, it's
true. There is a very limited season, but there is a good amount of time during hiking season where you can hike any particular section of the trail from outside of Southern California, because the weather's just so different in Southern California. Between essentially like late June, early July to late September-ish, every section from the High Sierras north is going to be open for hiking, which gives you July, August, September, a good 3 months of hiking anywhere you want on the Pacific Crest Trail. And Southern California particularly is more like March through May for those 3 months, peaking in April. Just a battle between whether it's going to be too cold versus whether it's going to be too hot. So if you're hiking another section, anytime through July and September is going to be the perfect time for that. Now, fair warning, July is when the snows are melting the fastest, so you may run into some snow in your section, and more likely you're going to run into mosquitoes hatching on the trail because of all the water running off. So,
and I was going to ask about the river crossings and things like that. I mean, I've just heard horror stories, but I don't know if that's just embellished or if that's real.
That varies directly with the amount of snow that's melting, especially in the High Sierra. And there are videos of just waterfalls just coming down the side of the trail with all of the snow melting all at once. It is generally a good idea, especially if you're through hiking the trail, because you're going into the Sierras as whenever you get there. It's hard to just, wait around for the perfect season, especially because you're running out of time to get the rest of the trail done. It's generally a good idea to group up, with a few good people that are hiking at about the same pace that you're hiking, that, like to get on the trail at the same time, like to stop at the same time, like to take the same number of breaks that you do, just to group up with them so that everyone can keep an eye on each other in case anybody comes into trouble. And especially for some of the river crossings, one of the most famous is the river in Evolution Valley. It might just be the Evolution River. I forget what it's called, but it's the river in Evolution Valley where there are two places to cross.
Now, where is that at in relationship to, is that in the Sierra?
Yeah, that is in the High Sierra.
Okay.
It's between, it's north of Muir Pass and south of Selden Pass.
Okay.
And it is oftentimes running very fast and very high, so that the official crossing point where the trail just dumps you out at the river is impassable during high waters. So they recommend that you go back about 1.5 miles or so into Evolution Meadow and cross the much wider, much lower, much slower water through the meadow, which can still, in a high water situation, be up to your chest level. I've seen videos of through hikers holding their packs above their heads in order to make sure that their packs don't get wet while crossing there. And more often I see groups of through hikers, crossing as a group, linking arms together. There are two strategies for crossing rivers in high speed, high depth situations, where you want to link together as a line and have your strongest hikers at the end, or you can link your arms together in a circle, and that way everybody has two people to hold on to. I think just the most important thing is just to have other people to hold on to, so that if one person slips, most of the rest of the other people aren't slipping and can hold that person.
Right. And I've also read that, if somebody was hiking, by themselves, that they would actually camp and wait for people to show up so they could cross, and be safe about it and cross together.
Yeah. The best time to hike, best time of day anywhere in the High Sierra or in a snow melting situation is always early in the morning, because at night the snow and water refreezes again and runoff will decrease to its lowest level. So not only will your rivers be as low as possible, but also your passes will be, the snow on the passes that you have to climb over will be as hard and as compacted as particularly possible, so that you don't post hole, or even worse, have the snow give out from underneath you and you start sliding, which is what your ice axe is for. So you want to camp just before the most difficult parts of the trail and then hit them very early in the morning. Fortunately, most of those are about a day apart in the Sierra section, so you don't lose very much daylight or mileage by camping just before the most difficult sections of the trail there. So that's excellent. That's excellent to know. It's just, you got at the end of the day, you got to be safe. You really got to be safe when it comes to these high passes, the river crossings and things like that. So listen, Christopher, I'm telling you right now, we could go for probably another 2 to 3 hours, but I think we've given the listeners a really good taste of not only you and what you've done with your accomplishments in your through hiking and your section hike, but also some of the logistics behind the Pacific Crest Trail. And I'm definitely going to have you back on. We've got to talk more about the Continental Divide Trail and logistics that go with that. I cannot thank you enough. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. And I want to summarize by saying that, we've talked about a lot of dangerous things on trail, like, the heat in the desert, dry sections, snow, high river crossings, just, a lot of things where, there is a risk to hiking. And granted, there is a risk to hiking, but I don't want to put anybody off from getting into these sections, because during their ideal time, they are much safer. and much more accessible by even inexperienced people that want to get into long distance hiking. And just as a reminder, like thousands of people are on the Pacific Crest Trail every year. And some people get injured and, some people, there are some problems, but the vast, vast majority have no problem with whatever section they get through. They get through the section. There's no issue. I always tell myself when I'm on trail, like, if this were impossible, there would be a huge backup of hikers just sitting there scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to get through just this one section. So if everyone in front of me has done it, I can do it too.
That's perfect. That is perfect advice. And I could go ahead and tell you, those of us on the East Coast, we cannot wait to get out there and hike on the West Coast. I mean, it is just so gorgeous and such a dream. And having a little taste of myself of Mount Rainier. I've also been in Yosemite National Park. I mean, I could lay down and die there too. So there's so many places out there that are absolutely gorgeous. But, you got to talk about being safe as well. So
it's true.
Yeah. So now I think we've come to the point in the podcast where the guest is going to sign off for us by reading their own journal entry, statement, or quote that will inspire us to keep hiking section by section.
Yeah. And I don't keep a journal, so I can't quote my own words. But I would like to share a quote from Mr. John Krakauer, who is the author of Into the Wild, a book and movie, which I imagine a lot of people that are into long distance hiking are familiar with. And the quote goes, "The very basic core of a man's living spirit is his passion for adventure. The joy of life comes from our encounters with new experiences, and hence there is no greater joy than to have an endlessly changing horizon, for each day to have a new and different sun." And I read that, I hear it, and I just think, wow, this guy gets it. The constant adventure of new horizons, new trail, new experiences. That is the very core of why most of us get out there to go hiking.
Exactly. No better way to end the podcast. Thanks again, Christopher, for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Thanks so much for being on the podcast, Christopher. I am glad the listeners were able to hear how you've embraced your trail name iPod and were able to give all of us some very valuable information about the Pacific Crest Trail. I really look forward to having you back on the podcast to discuss more about the section hiking logistics of the Continental Divide Trail. Next up, we have Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kammeyer as we continue our talks about gear. Welcome back to Let's Talk Gear with Steve Kammeyer. After reviewing the Backpacking Gear Reviews and FAQs page, there seems to be a lot of talk out there about satellite communication devices. More so the Garmin inReach versus the Spot satellite system. I know for me, I've used the Spot device since 2009 and I've really not had any issues, but the Garmin inReach seems to be moving up in the spotlight. On today's episode of Let's Talk Gear, we're going to have Steve go over some communication devices with us, and then we're going to get into another listener question. Welcome back to the episode, Steve.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So I know you just heard the intro and the communication devices, and I really don't want to put one against the other, but those two seem to be the popular communication devices. So talk to us about, I guess, the importance of maybe having one, the ones that get out the most communication, and just why you should carry one to be safe in the backcountry.
Sure, absolutely. And again, for those of you that have been listening in or tuning in over the last episodes, you'll know that I am a mountain climber. So it's very often that I am off trail. I'm in the snow. I'm up high. I'm way far away. And I always want to have something with me. Not only do I have a avalanche beacon, which that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day.
Right.
But you want to have some kind of a safety SOS device with you. And you are 100% correct. The two most famous ones out there are the Spot or the Garmin inReach. And really, there's a couple of major differences between the two. It really just depends on how much money you want to spend, because the money difference is quite significant between those two. And then also what you want to do with that device.
Okay.
The one nice thing about the Spot is it works anywhere, and it's cheap. I mean, you can buy the Spot Gen 3 is what I use personally, and I think the initial unit cost me like $75, and then it cost me like $150 a year after that, which sounds like a lot to some people, but when you travel into the backcountry and deep into the backcountry, as often as I do, 10, 12 bucks a month is nothing to be able to give your friends and family the peace of mind of knowing that not only are you still alive, but if you do get into trouble and you do take a fall or you do take a slide or you do come across a bear, or in my case, a moose, you
oh no
you
we'll have to get the you got trapped by a moose story a little bit later.
You just my heart is racing right now just thinking about it. But you can honestly, you can just press a button and you are notifying the first responders, and you're notifying search and rescue, and you're notifying 911, you're notifying your family, you're notifying anybody that needs to know what's going on and that you are in trouble. And you know what? I haven't looked at it recently, but I want to say there's, I don't know, like 10,000 people or 7,000 people have been saved, like life-saving situations from the Spot device. Now,
I've read that as well.
Yeah, it's a incredible number, and it truly is. It's a great device to have. It's really small. It's really, really super light. The batteries last forever, and you can also it doesn't just necessarily have to be a, oh my gosh, I'm dying, send help. You can press a little check-in button as often as you want to, and what that does is that can email up to 10 different people. Friends, family, coworkers, whoever you want to know, and that will show them your exact location. So not only does it let them know that you're still alive and you're still breathing, but it also lets them know that you are still moving too. Now, the upgrade from that would be the Garmin InReach, which is basically a two-way. You can almost think about the Garmin like a cell phone. You can text back and forth with it. You can use it as an actual GPS unit, meaning you can plug in coordinates on your Garmin and follow them. Whereas the Spot, I don't want to call the Spot a stupid device, but it's not a smart device. It does correct. It does have GPS technology in it, but you're not able to use that GPS technology to your advantage. You can just let people know where you are at.
I guess it has just a different, what I would call maybe like an interface system is why maybe the Garmin is becoming, I'm seeing more and more people saying they've switched to the Garmin InReach. Right. Maybe because it's more user friendly. I'm not sure, but continue on with that.
No, sure. And I definitely, one of the reasons is, and especially now over the last, it's been about 18 months now. Before, a lot of folks didn't use the Garmin because it was so heavy. I mean, this thing was like 2 pounds, and it was an awesome device, but it was extremely expensive. And of course, it had that fun capabilities, but your yearly subscription cost more, and the unit itself just weighed a ton. Well, now they have the Garmin Mini out, which is incredible, and it weighs no more than a Spot does, and it has all the same capabilities as the old heavy monster Garmin does. So in that sense, Garmin has really, kind of taken the bull by the horns, and they've really stepped up their game as far as putting all of this technology into a little itty bitty tiny package. And the price is still up there. I mean, the price is still $200-300 easily.
Right.
And then your yearly plan is $200-300 easily. But again, you do have a lot more options using the InReach, where you can actually send texts back and forth to your friends, family, or whatever, as opposed to just pressing a little check-in button and letting them know where you're at. So really, it just depends on what you are looking to do with this device. Is it worth it to you to spend the extra money to have the ability for two-way communication, or do you just need a simple, light, inexpensive device to alert the authorities if you're in serious trouble?
Right. Are there other options out there? I know there's different beacons and things. Say maybe you just want to carry, you don't want to carry the Spot. You're not interested in the two-way communication, but you do want a device that will be a beacon if you're, dangling from a tree or something really bad happens. Are there other options out there besides those two?
Well, yeah, there is. And I mean, this goes back to my heart and my life of climbing mountains during the wintertime. We do carry avalanche beacons, and it's kind of the same concept in a way, but it's not in a way too. An avalanche beacon is not going to call the authorities if you get into trouble. But should you get hit by an avalanche and somebody knows that you've been hit by an avalanche, when search and rescue comes, they can catch the pings off of your beacon and they can find your body, basically.
Gotcha.
Should you live through it and you're lucky enough, I would call that one a stupid device. It doesn't do anything.
Okay.
It doesn't do anything but just send off a signal saying, here I am, here I am, here I am. It doesn't call anybody. It doesn't alert anybody. There is no monthly plan or yearly plan for that. It's just a one-time purchase. You buy it, you got it, you put it on, you strap it onto your body, and you turn it on when you're out in the backcountry playing around.
You said that someone has to be with you or not. So,
well, no. And, if you're caught in an avalanche, somebody needs to see. Yeah. Somebody has to notify the authorities or search and rescue because the device itself does not do that. That is the big difference between a basic stupid avalanche transceiver as opposed to something like the InReach or the Spot, which those do contact the authorities.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good. So the next question that we have, Steve, you better get ready for this one. I actually got several emails for the all famous question of hiking boots versus trail runners. So take it where you want, Steve. Hiking boots versus trail runners. Here you go.
Shooey. Okay. Well, first of all, hike your own hike. And do whatever works out. Do whatever works out best for you. This is one of those things that is really and truly personal preference. And this, just hearing this question takes me back to being a child and my dad with his big monster leather boots with thick red shoelaces, and
probably still in the closet, huh?
Probably. And gosh, them things had to weigh like 9 pounds or something. I'm not sure, but it is definitely personal preference. The reason that trail runners even became a thing is because people realized, well, if I take 3 or 4 pounds off of each foot, I can move a little faster and move a little further, which is just absolutely totally true. I mean, a lot of people don't really understand if you've got 2 or 3 pounds on each foot and you're taking, 30,000 steps every day, you're putting your legs through a lot of extra weight. And depending on where you are hiking, what kind of terrain you are in, there may not be any need to be wearing boots. So it really just depends. And I know that we've talked before and I've been waiting for this one to come around because
and most people have both. I mean, truth be told, like if you're hiking in the winter, you might need to have a boot depending on what you're doing. I mean, if you're out in the summer and you've got a 15-pound pack, okay, put your trail runners on. Like,
sure.
Yeah. And I know for me, it took years, and I don't know why. I mean, I've worn boots, I've worn trail runners, I've gone back to boots, now I'm in trail runners. And then you get into all the different kinds of boots and all the different kinds of trail runners. So this question is popular, but it's so loaded. How do you even begin, talking to people about this?
Right. Well, two different things. First of all, we all have different feet. And so your feet might be one of the reasons why you would choose one over the other. The only other option that really, or the only other aspect of this thing that really would make that decision for you is where are you hiking? I mean, if you're going to be hiking in seriously rocky terrain, I mean, I've worn trail runners. I'm a huge fan of ultra shoes, and I've worn ultras up in the mountains on 99% rock. And at the end of the day, my feet are absolutely killing me just because they don't have as much stiffness, as much padding, as much whatever underneath as what an actual hiking boot does. So like yourself, I own both. I own boots and I own shoes, but I also have a weird thing happening here. And this is what I was waiting to tell the whole world, I guess. My second toe is about 3/4 of an inch longer than my big toe. So
I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, you're not the only one.
Thankfully, and you know what? This is funny because I thought I was like this freak of nature until I started getting into the online hiking groups and getting into this exact same conversation about boots versus shoes, and I found out that I'm not totally weird. I'm just half weird. So, but finding the right shoe, finding the right boot is almost impossible for me because I either end up with something that's going to give my middle toe enough room, but then the boot itself is just too big and it feels like I'm wearing clogs, or I have to squish that toe in really, really tight to get something that's going to fit. And then my feet hurt by the, end of the day anyways. So enter trail runners. And once I discovered ultras, holy cow. It was like,
and the ultras have heaven. The wider,
correct, right.
They have the splay. The whole thing is about your toes being able to splay. Correct. And your natural foot strike, right?
Correct. Yep. Ultra shoes are, they're famous because they're just great shoes, but they've really, really taken off because they have the wide toe box on them. And, even for people that have narrow feet, you can still have a wide toe box, but have a narrow foot. Because a lot of people just say, well, I have really narrow feet and I have troubles finding shoes anyway. So why do I want something with a wider, toe box? I say try them because it's like, it's like heaven. It's like putting your foot in water. It's just so comfortable and it's just beautiful. It's just,
And there have been surveys about ultras. I think the last time I saw a survey, it is the number one, trail shoe right now out on the Appalachian Trail. It used to be the Solomon, like XA Pro, and then it was, the Brooks Cascadia, the Hokas.
Yep.
The terrible thing about the Hokas, and I guess I can say this because it's my podcast, they don't last. They tear down, and it's like I had a pair of Hokas out on the AT, and literally the top of the shoe came off of the base of the shoe. It was crazy.
Right. Yeah, and
I know they've probably fixed them by now and all that good stuff. So, but it's just you got to be careful about the quality of the shoe as well, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For sure, absolutely. And that, really that goes with anything that is backpacking gear related, whether it be a backpack or a tent or a stove, or in this case, shoes or boots. The lighter you get, the less durable you get. And even with, ultras, I've had dozens of pairs of ultras. And you're not going to get more than 400 or 500 miles out of a pair. You're just not. It just isn't going to happen. So in that sense, if money is your thing, then maybe you're better off buying $150, $200 pair of boots that might last you for 2,000 miles, as opposed to blowing $100, $150 on a pair of shoes that's going to be 400 or 500 miles.
Right. And we haven't even gotten into like the tread on the shoe.
Right.
The tread of I used to wear Keen boots, and the bottom of those things, you can't destroy the bottom of those things, but they destroyed my feet. So you kind of have to, weigh, hey, this shoe's got X tread on the bottom. And I know, the Ultras and the Cascade, they make, certain types of treads and materials and, the Vibram or Vibram bottoms and things like that. So get into the tread a little bit.
Sure. And like you said, those Keens, those are like putting Goodyear tires on your feet and going, because seriously,
I couldn't think of that. Thank you.
You can go anywhere and do anything with those things. You're stuck. You're definitely stuck. And again, it just depends on where you're going to be hiking. It depends on what terrain you are going to be in. With that being said, ultras, when I put on a pair of ultras, I feel like a mountain goat. I can climb rocks. I can climb slippery rocks. I can do just about anything that I want to do, but without having such a stiff sole on your feet like you would if you were using boots, you just can't last quite as long out there. So this takes us to section hiking, because that's what this is all about, right?
That's what it's about right there.
Right. So if you are, say, Appalachian Trail section hiking, you're going to have a lot of really long stretches that are just flat dirt or semi-flat dirt. You're not really going to hit. Well, I haven't hiked the whole thing, so I can't tell you when you're going to hit rocks. But if
Pennsylvania. Steve,
I was just going to say, if you want to break it down and get really, really simple, you can almost wear trail runners the whole way until you hit Rocksylvania. Then at that point, you might want to be switching off to boots. So it is, like you said, it is a good thing to have both of those items in your arsenal. It just really depends on the time of year. I don't wear trail runners during the wintertime usually because I don't like snow on my feet. So, if it's wintertime, maybe you're better off in boots. If you're going to be on rocks for all day, every day, maybe you're going to be better off in boots. If you're looking to move fast and light, trail runners are the way to go.
Or where it's at. And we haven't even gotten into like Gore-Tex trail runners versus non-Gore-Tex. That's just a whole nother boots versus trail runners. This is just a tough topic. I'm not sure if we really answered anything for anybody, but we gave some people some things to think about, because quite honestly, like you said, I think it boils down to what you said earlier. Everybody has different feet, and what works for you quite honestly, I mean, if you've got I have a bunion on my left foot. I call it my Charlie bunion. It's just like, I can't wear, I can't wear a certain shoe if it rubs up against that bunion. So it's like, you have the longer toe, I've got the bunion, and we're not going to be able to wear the same shoe. I mean, and it took me years to figure out what worked best for me. And that's not even getting into the socks that work with the shoes the best. I mean, it really takes a while to perfect that. So
yeah, definitely. And I mean, if I just have like 30 more seconds, just because you did, bring it up, a lot of people are waterproof trail runners. I don't get it. I just don't get it. The purpose of trail runners, and the one thing that I love about trail runners, is if they get wet, they dry so fast. If you get waterproof trail runners and you get water inside of your shoe, it just stays wet forever. So, I mean, really, there's very, very rare situations where you would want a Gore-Tex or an actual waterproof trail runner. Forget all that stuff. If your feet get wet, your feet are going to get wet. If you step in the creek, your feet are going to get wet no matter what you're wearing, unless you're wearing bread bags on your feet. So, go with the actual traditional trail runners, the mesh, the super ultralight. Use the shoe for what it's meant to be used for, and those things will dry quicker than anything. They're awesome.
Quick. And go get fitted. Like, go to a place that's actually going to, like, bring out 8 pairs of shoes, have you try them on, have you do different things, If you go to the warehouse bargain and you pick up a thing of shoes, just, beware. Your foot might be blistered and everything else going on. But I just recommend people go and get fitted for their shoes.
For sure. And since we've been talking about Ultra so much, Ultra has a very weird sizing system. And this is good and this is bad. This is bad because if you wear a size 11 in any other shoe, you might have to size up to a size 12 in your Ultras to make them fit proper. But the good side of this is there has been so much talk on the internet about what size works for what people. So it doesn't take but a real quick Google search, and you can pretty much find out from home what size you think you might want.
Right.
For those people that might not have a good shoe fitter or a REI just down the road from them, if you have to order online, definitely go online and do your homework first, because especially when it comes to Ultras, you might need to be sizing up.
Exactly. And I'm still in the Brooks Cascadias, so don't say anything I don't want to hear.
You're good.
All right. I'm not sure we answered people's questions, but we gave you Steve gave you some really, really good advice and what to look for and get fitted. And he did reveal to us about his toe, and now I have a bunion. So thanks, Steve, for chatting with us. Again, we'd love to have Steve answer some of your gear questions on the podcast, and God knows what we're going to get into next time. So if you have questions, please send them to me via email. And if any of you want to come on and unveil what your feet look like, or send me pictures, and email me at jesternc2212@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, river and through the woods. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets in these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
The holidays start here at Baker's with a variety of options to celebrate traditions old and new. Whether you're making a traditional roasted turkey or spicy turkey tacos, your go-to shrimp cocktail, or your first Cajun risotto, Baker's has all the freshest ingredients to embrace your traditions. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Choose from a great selection of digital coupons and use them up to 5 times in one transaction. Check our app for details. Baker's, fresh for everyone.